let's talk about prefabs. Alright, we found ourselves back in Unity once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be adding prefabs to our already existing scene right here. So basically, prefabs, as a high-level overview, are a way of saving an already existing game object, right? In our case, it's going to be the bolt right here, and then creating that game object in code. We can basically spawn that game object inside of the code. It's going to be really awesome. It's not actually going to be that difficult. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Now for this, I highly recommend you get the projectile Unity package linked in the description below. So you get basically this entire setup exactly like it is right now. And the way that it works right now is I can take this ballista and I can fire it once and then the bolt is gone. And you know, the bolt, when it hits an asteroid, is going to spin around crazily. But basically there's no way of me to fire the ballista again. And that is what we're going to add right now. So first and foremost, in our project over here in the assets, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this the prefabs. And then I'm going to take this bolt and I'm just going to set this down right here, and now I have a bolt down here with exactly the same parameters and components as the bolt inside of our scene. And you will even see that the bolt right here is blue. So this basically means that this bolt comes from a prefab, and if I were to drag in the prefab again, you will see that now I still have a bolt and it basically retains all of the same information. Now, the first thing you might say, wait a second, you just said that it retains all of the information, yet this bolt is smaller than this bolt. Actually, this is the case because of the parent of the bolt. This bolt is 1-1, while this bolt is also 1-1 in scale. However, it gets scaled up by its parent because the parent is 3x3, right? So it gets scaled up by 3 because of the scaling of the parent. So if I were to spawn this under the parent, so if I immediately put this here, you can see all of a sudden it retains the same size. So do keep that in mind when you're also spawning it and dragging it into, and also taking it from the hierarchy. So if I were to take the bolt outside of it, you can see all of a sudden the numbers here change, right? The scale changes to 3x3, because in this case, outside of the parent, it actually is 3x3. So just keep that in mind, especially when you have like parents and child objects as prefabs. It can get quite complicated depending on the local and the world scale. So there's two different scales. So do keep that in mind. And we will now change the ballista shooting script right here to, instead of taking the fired bolt or just taking the fired bolt, that we're also going to be able to reload. We're going to reload the ballista, basically spawning a new bolt if there's not a bolt already in there, and then we can fire the new one as well. For this, we will need another boolean. We're going to call this the bool reloaded. There you go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set reloaded to true, because we actually start with a fired bolt. So that's going to be pretty awesome indeed. And then one thing, and this is going to be universal, every time you have a prefab, you need a game object. So I'm just going to duplicate this line. I'm just going to select this line, press Ctrl D to duplicate it. And then this is going to be my bolt prefab. So basically every time you have a prefab that you want to create copies of, let's say, you will need a serialized field of this particular prefab, because we actually need to set this in the inspector so that the game knows, okay, this is the game object that I'm going to copy over. We're going to add a few more methods to this. So the idea is I'm going to make a private bool. I'm going to call this the try shoot method, because in this case now I actually want to make sure that we are reloaded and we're not already shooting. So I'm going to return the reloaded, and I'm also going to say I don't want to be shooting yet. And then I can actually fire. So we can take this not shooting out of this, and inside of this we can then say if try shoot. So this is going to be the try shoot method called then. If this is true, then we can shoot, and else what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to debug something. So we basically know that, hey, we actually first have to load the ballista, for example. So for example, the ballista first has to be reloaded. So now we're also getting feedback. Now, of course, with the debug log, it isn't real feedback that the player would receive, but you can think about it in the same way, right? If we wouldn't have a debug, we could also display text on the screen or do a noise or anything like that. Basically just signaling to the player, wait a second, there is something wrong. You can't actually use this action yet. It is always a great way to think about this, basically, that the player receives enough feedback so that they know what is going on. And then we're going to use another input, and that's going to be the get key down. And the key code here is going to be R, because in this case I wanted to reload with the R key, and the setup over here is going to be the exact same thing. I first want a private bool method called the try reload, and this is going to return reloaded false, basically, of course, because if we are already reloaded, I can't reload. That should be pretty self-explanatory. And we'll also make a private void reload method, which is going to do a couple of things. This is actually going to be quite an extensive method, all things considered. We're first of all going to say reloaded is equal to true. Then we will set shooting to false, actually, because in this case, when we reload, we know, okay, we've already shot the ballista, right? So that is the idea. And then the fired bolt, we're going to set this to a new ballista from this bolt prefab. So this is basically how we're spawning a new game object. You will be amazed because literally the only thing we do is we call the instantiate method right here, passing in bolt prefab, and then this.transform. And that's it. That is going to create the new game object, and it's going to immediately save this in the fired bolt field. And this should actually be everything that we need to do, because in this case, the transform that we're passing in here is going to be the parent of the spawned game object. So it's going to do the same thing as if I were to drag it onto our ballista, and then it's going to spawn immediately as a child of the ballista, retaining all of its other values. So that should be immediately what is going to happen there. So we can now finish the reloading. So this is first of all going to say if try reload. And if this is true, well, then we're going to just reload. Awesome. And then else, what we're going to do is we're going to say, once again, debug.log, and we will just say the ballista is already reloaded. And now, funnily enough, this is actually everything we're going to need. If you break it down into these small components like the reload method and the try reload method, right, and the shoot method and the try shoot method, you will see that individually, each of these methods really aren't that complicated when you think about it. But if you put them together in a logical way, all of a sudden you realize, man, this is a really freaking cool script. And to test this, we want to go to our ballista right here. And this is incredibly important. In the bolt prefab, we want to take the prefab from the assets folder and drag it into the prefab right here. This is extremely important. Otherwise, we actually can't spawn a new bolt. And if I were to now start the game, first of all, I'm going to try to press R. We'll see the ballista is already reloaded. That is exactly right. Now I'm going to shoot this. And if I now were to try to shoot, we'll find the ballista first has to be reloaded. Fair enough. So I'm going to press R and you will see nothing. Why would this be the case? Well, take a look. It says the ballista is already reloaded. All right. Why could this be the case? Well, probably in the shoot method, we're not resetting the reloading. Could this be the case? Well, let's take a look at the shoot method and you will see, yes, we're not setting reloaded to false. So there you go. Adding this is now also going to reset reloaded. And with that, we basically are done. This is also a great way to think, right? Basically go through each one of the possibilities of what might happen, right? I already have this loaded. I press R, it doesn't work. I shoot, I have it loaded, I shoot, it works, right? I try to shoot again after I've already shot, it doesn't work. I press R now, and we got a bolt, right? And I press R again, it doesn't work because we're already loaded. I can shoot and I can basically reload as, you know, as soon as I've shot. So you can see now they're actually hitting each other. Like, it's all sorts of craziness. So you can do some crazy stuff here, but regardless of that, it is pretty cool. Now this looks absolutely insane, but there you go. That is going to be how you can use a prefab to spawn another bolt, basically effectively reloading our ballista that we have right here. And that would be a short and easy introduction to prefabs. Now, the short and easy introductions aren't over just yet, because next time in this video, we'll take a look at basic 2D animations for our ballista. Hope to see you there. So, yeah.